If you're a normal person in need of compressed air, you just go out and buy a normal air compressor. If you're a stark raving lunatic in need of compressed air, you go on Facebook Marketplace and you pay the same amount of money to end up with something like this. So obviously I chose that route. This is my 1920s United States air compressor, and based on the advertisements I found online, this would have been marketed to filling stations and automotive service garages. You can see that looks very much like our machine there. You can see they also marketed an air tower, which is very cool. Based on, and when I got this, it had a newer replacement Sears Craftsman motor, which did not look the part at all. And if you look at the drawing on the advertisement, that looks very much like a Wagner motor. So I found a Wagner motor to go on this. And I've got a couple advertisements here, a couple other ones. This shows multiple sizes. Usaco. And I do not believe this is the original pressure switch either, which would have looked something like that, judging from this advertisement. Here's another ad. This is pretty cool. So March 11th, 1920, from Motor Age. A sharp snap, a sudden rush of air. You can see on this motor they have a little gizmo attached on the side, and it appears that I don't know what they've got going on, but something when it raises the brushes off, it's also doing something to the air. Automatic pressure release. Don't know. But anyway, these originally would have had a flat belt drive, judging by the width of this pulley. Flat leather belt, and on the motor they would have had what's known as a paper pulley, and that paper surface provides traction to drive the belt. When I got this, the motor had a V-belt pulley on it, and I was running just a regular V-belt of a particular size. And I have yet to acquire the proper flat belt or the proper flat belt pulley. So in order to make this link belt work, I've had to cobble together this nonsense on the pulley in order to keep the belt from slipping off, as it would frequently do. So it works. It's ghetto. Don't judge me. I relocated this pressure switch, which had been mounted over here. I thought this was a nicer spot. And I also fabricated a missing cover using some thin sheet aluminum. The original would have been quite a bit thicker, I believe, but this was easy to work with, so I bent a profile and cut some little tabs so that it would slot down in there and it's screwed onto the top. Plumbed this in. This has 1/4-inch OD copper tubing, like you'd use to hook up like a refrigerator ice maker if you're smart enough not to use the plastic evil stuff. And there are 3 plumbing connections to this. One goes to the tank, and this is what actually causes the diaphragm to turn the pressure switch off and on. The other one comes from the pump, which has its own little baby tank built into it. There is a reservoir here. And this goes to the unloader, which relieves the pressure from the pump when it turns off. And the unloader discharge can just vent right off of here. You don't need to have anything connected here, but I've just got it, a short piece that goes down under there so that little blast of air doesn't come off the thing. This is quite worn out, and there is some oil that gets into the airstream, so it would kind of spray a little bit of oil out, and that's mostly why I did this. So from here, our power comes from a junction box. You might recall from a previous video that I did have a relay and transformer connected. This I cannibalized off an old Philtech Central Vac, and this was my control station. So I had the setup so that I could keep the tank filled and the compressor would just be on. Obviously, the pressure switch would be on. The motor would only be running when the thing didn't have enough pressure. Or I could push a button and get one tank full of air, and that was so that I could like pump up tires or whatever, and I wouldn't forget to turn it back off. So kind of unnecessary, because all I had to do would be to go on and off again. This was a latching circuit, so that even if I turned this on and off, it would not kill the power until the tank had actually come up to pressure. So this is my new setup here. I have a junction box with more room. I've got a double pole relay. I have a control transformer. And this can be fed with multiple voltages, so depending on which one of these wires you use, you can use 120 volts or 208 volts or 240 on the same transformer. Very handy. This is a heating and cooling part. And I added a terminal strip. I added an indicator light, which for some reason glows faintly even when the switch is in the off position. These indicator lights are 120 volt, and my voltage in here is 240. There is no neutral coming in. So in order to make my 120 volt indicator lights work, I ran them in series so that each one gets 120. Because who's got $4 for new indicator lights of the proper voltage, right? The only reason there's a transformer in here is because my relay that I had has a 24 volt coil instead of a 240 volt coil, which would allow me to eliminate the transformer. I was debating whether to switch the 24 volt side or the 240 volt side of the transformer, and I drew up a little sketch showing each scheme. So in this arrangement, my switches would have been controlling the 24 volt, and my indicator lights would have been fed separately with 240 volts, giving them each 120. But what I chose to do was switch the 240 volt, switch the primary side of the transformer, because then I only needed a 3-wire control circuit instead of 4 wires. So I ended up with this. This is my junction, or my relay box, my control box, and then here's my remote start station, which I'll show you down in the workshop. So only 3 wires, because you know that copper ain't getting any cheaper. So out here, if I want to turn it on, I can flip this switch. And then I'll show you down in the basement. So down here, mounted on this column, I have, coming down from the attic, the 1/2-inch black iron airline and my 1/2-inch EMT control circuit conduit. And I've got a box mounted here with just a regular residential wiring device. This is a duplex combo single pole switch and another indicator light. Now these switches are not 3-way, so if you turn it on here, you have to turn it off here. But you may or may not be able to make out the sound of the compressor from down here. But I can hear it. And then of course I've got my quick connect. I've got my pressure gauge. I have my blow off valve. I could add a regulator if I needed to, but the only thing I really use this for is to blow out parts and run the occasional finish nailer or something for a project. So that's my setup. And then on an unrelated note, on the back side of this same column, I brought down a vacuum drop, and this gate valve has its own micro switch so that I can and that's for whatever I might need to use that for. But anyway, that's my setup, and as always, thank you for watching.